And and Evan, I'm turning it over to you
Great.
and let you take over. Thank you so much.
Super. Okay, everybody, one sec. Here we go. So thank you, Adrian. I'm always grateful to have an opportunity to meet with this group. I know everybody here, everybody knows me. Um, I love to have the opportunity to talk about health any which way because I live and eat and breathe this stuff. It's always a challenge when I'm working with people who are trying to run their businesses, and what ends up happening is they don't understand that there is a connection between everything that you do and your business, everything that you do in your relationships. And the most important relationship is the one that you have with yourself. And what I find is that I work with business owners and leaders who've climbed that ladder to success, but what they've done is they've left their health on the bottom rung because they thought they had to. They didn't have time to exercise, they had to work harder, they didn't have time to eat right, and they just didn't have time. Well, what ends up happening is, as everybody knows, that time and things creep up on you, but health isn't priceless until you lose it. And so part of what I want to do today is to talk to you about if you take better care of yourself, you're going to be able to get better care of your business. And that's why I created ProAttitudes. And my premise here is to really talk to you about what are you focused on right now in your life? You could imagine this is you and you're looking through that lens. What is it that is consuming you? Or what is your area of focus? You can't be focused on everything because our brains don't work that way. But, I'm going to pause here and I want to know, like, is there anything here that jumps out at you that is consuming your time, energy, focus?
Anger, play.
Well, anger we got to work on. What are you angry about?
He's a New York City commercial real estate
Okay.
broker.
But other than the regular stuff, so I was terribly excited to have gone 2 feet in and been using uh, a remote administrative professional. And I spent the better part of the last 6 weeks training her and trusting her and getting some productivity. Was really excited for the future. And yesterday was her last day. Boom, no notice.
Oh,
Almost
Wow.
made me want to jump down to Trinidad and find somebody to choke, but you know.
We've all been there, but I feel your pain. Been there, done that. And, unfortunately, we cannot control the circumstances. We can only control our perspective, right? Um, yeah. But when you think about like right now, what you're focused on, not anger, but anger is the result of focusing on work. And you just saw everything change because you had this vision of 10xing it. And now that you've lost that person, right? There's that frustration. It's all about perspective. But what we can only really focus on is a few things at a time. Family, work, food are typically what we see people focused on. Adrian's going to be focused on travel too. Travel's going to be in there. So, right. But when you look at all of those things, what comes to mind? What happens is for me, I get overwhelmed, right? When you have all of those things that you look at that you can be focused on, it's overwhelming. So how do you look through the lens and still be able to say, I can take better care of myself and my business? What that to me is what wellness means to me. But what does wellness mean to you?
do you
It's
want
like,
us to answer?
absolutely.
For me, it's absolutely has been a major focus on myself, doing the right things for my health, because as we already talked about, it's absolutely critical that we can function at our best capacity, and we can't do it if we're not healthy. And I also it would extend that to the fact that the people around us, our households, our families, whatever, if we're worried about them, that's taking our eye off the ball as a business owner also. So I have done so many
Great.
things just to incorporate good habits on a daily basis, and they make a
Yep.
huge difference when I don't do it.
For
That's
me,
a
Evan, it's
Mhm.
really much simpler than that. I'm not so smart about this. I just, no, seriously, and don't profess to be. For me, what does wellness mean to me? That I can get my ass out of bed in the morning feeling excited, mentally happy and excited and strong, and physically feeling happy, excited, and strong. And I can marry the two over the course of the day and night, and end my day and night feeling incredibly grateful for every second I had working at optimum capacity.
I would
You
echo
know-
that, Adrian. I think it's energy. Like, I think wellness for me is that I have the energy to perform at the level I need to perform. And I always say that self-love is not selfish. For me to like serve my family, my business, my customers, I got to serve me first. So I do not feel guilty that I take care of myself.
You
Yeah.
know,
Keep going. I want more. This is good. Keep going, Harriet. Go ahead.
yeah, I'm just listening to everyone and I'm impressed with their definitions of wellness because they seem so expansive. To me, wellness up until this moment really meant physically able to function. And maybe that's a very small definition, but that's where I am essentially.
And you're all right. There's no wrong answer here. I think part of this is sharing this because it's about perception and paradigms. And when we think about what's out there, is how do we measure the things that we want to improve? Like in business, right? We have KPIs.
Mm-hmm.
But when you go to the doctor, doctors don't measure wellness. They measure sickness.
Mm.
So healthcare is really sick care. And that's not wellness. And that's the thing that to me always challenges me. When I worked in a cardiologist's office, and many years ago, that's where I had one of my practices there. One was in a health club, one was in a kidney nephrologist office, internist office. But he had a patient on the Bruce protocol machine giving him a stress test. And as soon as he got off that stress test and he had flying colors, everything was great. We all of a sudden we hear the commotion. He dropped dead. Boom. And I, even back then, it was like, how does something like this happen? You're with a doctor. They couldn't bring him back. He's dead. His family's now affected. He wasn't that old. Why is this happening? It was 690,000. They just updated this number. I did my master's thesis in cardiac rehab. So 690,000 people die from heart disease every year. It's the #1 killer in the United States. Do you know what the first symptom is for nearly half of them?
No symptoms.
No symptoms.
That's right. It was just what happened. Sudden death. Sudden death. They don't get a second chance.
My father had that happen at 42.
Mm.
Sudden
And
death.
that's why I do what I do, because to me seems like daunting. It's like, well, it would scare the heck out of me. It did as a kid, because I had all my family members dying from heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. But I don't believe
Can I share something relevant?
Absolutely.
I
Go for it, Scott.
canceled my cholesterol test this morning because I knew it would be high, so I canceled it. How do you like that one?
It's one of the pain points that I have with, like, I talk about being afraid to go to the doctor because of the report cards you're going to get. But cholesterol level being elevated is not, we can call it a KPI, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. There are so many things that are relevant, not just a total cholesterol. What causes the death of these people isn't the cholesterol. We have cholesterol in every cell of our body. It's necessary for cell communication. It's in every cell membrane. Our bodies produce it if you don't eat it. Adrian, being a vegetarian, right? She's still producing
Vegan.
cholesterol. Right, vegan. She's still producing plenty of cholesterol. Cholesterol is not the culprit. The culprit is up here. the mind, the neural pathways. So Scott, it would be the stress levels that you have. The fact that you're angry, that's the thing that I would want to work on, because you can't change the circumstances, but you can change your perspective. But when you're angry, you're following a neural pathway that's going to lead down the road towards heart disease. And that's something we have total control over. So what are the biggest challenges that you have? When I work and I interview all of the business leaders and owners that I work with, first one is fear of change. A lot of people don't think, oh, I don't have any fear of change. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a business owner. Absolutely, fear of change is one of the biggest problems that people have. They like the status quo. They keep repeating what they did yesterday. I call it blind imitation. Instead of finding deeper meaning and moving on, getting 1% better every day, they just decide to wake up and do the same thing they did yesterday. So they're afraid of change. They're in their comfort zone. What's problem number 2? Constant pressure, constant stress of putting the fires out. Scott, you're like a perfect example. That's what happened this morning, right? Or yesterday when right? Constant stress.
And they didn't even ask me to reschedule. They just said, okay.
And all of this on you to work on the business and in the business. Now, like you see the light at the end of the tunnel. Adrian, what were you going to say?
Well, can you just, and you don't have to address it now, maybe do it later. I've heard about, and honestly kind of think it's true, that there's positive stress and negative stress. And there's some things that are positive stress that's not bad. It's necessary or good. So is that, am I just like deluded?
No, you're not. I mean, think about it. If we didn't have any stress, we wouldn't get out of bed. They've done the research where that motivation of things that people have, certain damage to their brain, where they can't do anything just simply by having a damage to a certain part of their brain. So certain amount of stress is necessary, but when you put a level of stress, I call it a boil. If your boil level is up here, it's not what happens. It's really the circumstances. It's the perspective of how you handle it. So stress is not the problem. It's how you manage it, how quickly you recover too.
Thank you.
And your perception of it. What's problem number 3? I call this mojo. You're overlooking the small things. You miss out on moments of spontaneous joy. And Adrian and I know what that is because we do our gratitude practice every day. And I love perusing the gratitude practices of people who've been doing this I've been doing it. I don't know how many years ago we started doing this. It's got to be at least 3 years, but I know people have been doing it for a lot longer than that. But a daily practice of gratitude really does change things. So those are the 3 problems that I think all people, especially business owners and leaders, are challenged with. And it's all about the neural pathways. I don't believe that the chronic diseases that we're dealing with today, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, autoimmune dysfunction, are strictly diseases of metabolism. I believe that they're diseases of the neural pathways in our brain, and that the behaviors that we have, the habits that we have, are windows to our motivations. And those motivations come from belief systems. I work on reframing those belief systems and changing them. But where did they come from? They come from our inner critic. I'm now an inner coach, right? I've developed my inner coach, but my inner critic is something that I've developed. It's a way of understanding how we cope in today's world, but everybody's been through some kind of trauma in their life. We're motivated by survival. We have to survive and procreate. That's the basic human need, right? That's what we're here for. As children, we need to feel safe. And if we don't feel safe, we need to create stories to feel safe. And that's where the inner critic gets born. Mine, I'll give you a short story. I remember when I was a kid I was going to nursery school. My mom was dropping me off at preschool, and I was having a tantrum. I've always been with my mom. I had 2 older siblings, and this is the first time I was going to be alone, and I was just bawling, and I was not having anything to do with it. I was so busy bawling that I didn't see she left. She just dropped me off and left. And when I looked up and looked, the car is gone. Where is my mom? Abandonment. Now, my mom was a great mom. She did the best she could. But at that moment, that was a rupture in my connection with my mother. Because now I know that feeling vulnerable like that was a bad thing. Letting my emotions come out like that was unsafe. And I had to make sure that whenever that happened, right, I needed to stop and make sure that that didn't happen again. So I became a pleaser. I became what I call a harmony enthusiast. It's a type of inner critic. I also became very judgmental of myself, which is that inner judge. So these neural pathways are real. And to me, they can easily be reprogrammed. How do you do it? Well, one of the things is you have to stop listening to the lies in your head. Anybody remember this when you're growing up? This cartoon, Coyote?
Generally,
Roadrunner?
a specific one.
Okay, well, the Roadrunner, this is a lie that we were told. The Roadrunner's top speed is only 20 miles an hour, and the Coyote can run 43 miles per hour. So our whole childhood, right, is a lie. Well, we have lies that we've told ourselves. And it was why? To keep safe and also just to rationalize. We create these layers, these identities. And I think that those identities are the ones that are holding us back. So what if you could meet your future self 10 years from now? What would your future self say to you? Boy, I'm so happy that you did this starting today, because now that's where I'm now where I am because I was able to do that. Have you ever tried meeting your future self and finding out what they're thanking you for? It's one of the things that I do with my clients, but it's also something I'll ask you. What would your future self thank you for? 10 years from now, what's your future self going to thank you for that you're actually not doing, but maybe you'll make a decision to start doing?
Does it have to only do with work?
Can be do with anything.
Okay, so my future self would definitely thank me for recognizing 4 years ago that I was going to devote 1 day a week, take off from work, quote unquote, and spend with my grandchildren and create memories and bonds that I will be long gone and they will still remember.
Can you remember one of them 4 years ago? Just out of the blue, can you just go back and find that day, like not the day per se, but just a memory, and maybe share it?
From 4 years ago?
About like in the last 4 years, just one.
Okay, yeah, I
Just one.
can, because I was on jury duty. And I had to get off jury duty because my husband had a meeting, but I had him do the babysitting thing, and I had to drive. At that time, they lived in the city, so I had to drive from Long Island Courts, whatever it was, to get into the city. And I was incredibly stressed, And I, flew up the elevator, et cetera, and burst in. And she was a tiny baby then, but just learning to recognize faces, and gave me the biggest smile and that little cooey sound, and absolutely all that stress disappeared. I didn't remember where I was, and I was completely in the moment. And I think that was I have a recollection of me reminding myself that when joy overtakes you, you have to stay in the moment, because sometimes we run out of that moment of joy so quickly because we have to get back to our phone. I mean, how many times do you see people in a joyous situation at a dinner, everyone's laughing, it was friends and family, or people are in the fucking theater or concert or something, and they pull out their phone? What is going on? So
I totally agree. You're going to remember that the rest of your life. It's a moment that brings you joy when you remember it, because you're lighting up those neural pathways. But spending that extra day at work, if we can go back 4 years ago, the week before, can you remember what you did on the day that you were working?
No, because my days, so you don't know my
Right,
days,
I
but you
know,
could know a
but
little bit about my days.
the
They're
point
very
is that moments of
Yeah.
joy, this is creating that new neural pathway. And
Yep.
that's really, to me, the basis of health and wellness is having more moments of joy and creating a process and a system that promotes that.
Yep.
So what lies are holding you back? If it's physical, do you hear yourself ever say, I don't have the motivation to exercise? Or you might hear from a physical perspective, if only I was taller. Mental, you might hear like, well, who has time to read? I've heard this is all taking from people that I've talked to. Everywhere I turn, someone is smarter than me. What about this lie? Emotional and social. You just don't understand me. Rather than focusing on understanding, seeking to understand somebody, they're saying, well, you just don't understand me. They're not, that's a mindset, right? My family is a disaster. Every family is a disaster. Okay. What about spiritual? I can't sit still. I can't quiet my mind and meditate. I can't tell you how many people have told me, oh, there's no way I'm going to meditate. But it's not about quieting your mind. It's about sitting there and being a witness to what your thoughts and feelings are and letting it flow by. Very different than quieting. And I feel like my life is out of control. Can anybody relate to any of those? They're all lies. See, that's the problem. They're all lies. But they're coming from your inner critic. So what is this concept of become, be strong, be grateful, which is my process that I've created? The become is the first step. You see this butterfly?
Mm-hmm.
The caterpillar asks the butterfly, how do I become a butterfly? The butterfly tells the caterpillar, you have to want to fly so badly that you're willing to give up being a caterpillar. That's from Trina Paulus. One of my favorite quotes. It's really the basis of what this transformation means. There's going to have to be a letting go. There has to be a point where a necessary loss of letting go the neural pathways that you have, the habits that you have, and embracing new ones. But change has to feel good, right? If change doesn't feel good, you go back to the old neural pathways. And you can't just change habits because habits don't change the belief system. How do you get there? Well, it all starts with being a fly on the wall. It's my favorite. I've been using that for 30 years. Be a fly on the wall. Just awareness. Just watch yourself and say, oh, Evan's sitting there and getting stressed, or Evan is finding a moment of joy. Like, what is it that you're doing at the moment? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? And start looking at it through the lens of a curious archaeologist or scientist versus a judge. Start being kinder, because part of this is about first pulling things up from the subconscious to the conscious mind. And the way to do that is to start looking at being the witness. And that all starts with self-awareness. Okay. And it also depends on your state of mind. When you're in a primal state, okay, a little Darth Vader, my inner critic, I keep him up on my shelf. He used to be 6 feet tall. He's only 8.5 inches tall now. And it's Darth Vader. I keep him there just to remind me. But when you're in the primal state, you're very narrowly focused and you're in a fight or flight mode. That's the sympathetic nervous system. You're not going to be able to do things that are in your power state. They both occupy the same space. You cannot be in your primal state and your power state at the same time. Well, how do you get out of your primal state to get to your power state? It all starts with the one thing that I work with every one of my clients. It's breath. Breath connects the body, mind, spirit. It all begins with just taking a breath. It's pretty simple. And why? Because of the 4 brains that we have. In order to get out of the primal state, we have to get out of being human or being our, there are 4 brains, right? The first one is the Godzilla brain. This is the fight or flight. But then we also have that teenager werewolf, all the emotions and feelings that are part of it. And then there's the human brain, okay? but we have an even higher level brain. And that higher level brain, to me, I like to think we are spiritual beings living a human existence. However you want to define that spiritual connection. But when we're humans, humans are hardwired for comfort. Spirits, I think our souls are hardwired for growth. And this duality is really meant to be, and we are meant to constantly push ourselves outside that comfort zone. Otherwise, we're stuck. So now once you focus on becoming, the next step is being strong. Well, what does that mean? Think about if you go to the gym to work out, you go once. Are you in shape? You go twice, 10 times. How about 5 years? So somewhere between 10 times and 5 years, there's a point where you're going to start seeing a transformation, but you can't just say, oh, it happened and now you're done. It's about what I call the highest form of self-love, and that's discipline. And that's all part of being strong. Discipline, everybody looks at discipline as negative. Motivation is fickle. I never work with motivation. You'll never can depend on motivation. That's why one of my programs is called Bypassing Motivation. You need to figure out how to change the scripts in your head. It's a reframe. And it's all done with intention. So, but when you do this, it's a matter of perception. So if you think you can, you can. But if you think you can't, you're right also. Mary Kay said that. I know it's based on Henry Ford, but my thing is to look in the mirror and understand that when you do, you need to be able to say to yourself, hey, I don't like that about myself. And then you're ready for change. I have so many clients who can't look at themselves in the mirror, especially naked. Just take it all off. And I want you to look at something when you take the clothes off and say, well, this is something that I love about myself. And remember, what's the highest form of self-love? Anybody remember? I drill this into my clients. I do this all the time. They never remember. What's the highest form of self-love?
Discipline.
Thank you. So Sean is listening. I love it. Excellent. If you don't remember anything, that is the one thing I want you to remember. Okay. Well, another way I do this is with building your life bank account. It's really simple. Just make deposits. Just like you make money every day, you go to the bank, you deposit it at the end whenever your paycheck comes in, right? Well, in the beginning of when you first get a job, you're just having enough money paycheck to paycheck, right, to live. Most people live that way. Some people spend more money than they have, so they are constantly in debt. But the goal is to have enough money in the bank so that you can travel and spend time with your grandkids and do the things that you want. That's called freedom. Well, that principle works the same way when you make deposits in your health account, in your life account. Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. I look at physical as generating energy. Anything that generates energy. Drinking water, exercise, healthy eating. Mental, striving for excellence, reading a book, learning a new task. Emotional, social is developing connections. That can be anywhere. Connections with yourself, connections with your loved ones, connections with your team. And spiritual is seeking purpose. Seeking, not finding, because you don't ever find your purpose. You seek it, and it's constantly evolving and changing. And lastly is gratitude. Gratitude changes everything. So what is gratitude? I can do a whole presentation, I do, on gratitude, but we'll talk. Gratitude changes everything because it makes what you have enough. And it also gets you grounded in the precious present. If you're constantly saying, hey, this is just not good enough, right? You're thinking about the future. You're saying, I need to get something better. Like, I'm driving this car, it's not good enough. I need a better car. Instead of of just saying, hey, I'm so grateful that I have a car to drive. Or you could be regretful. Oh, I bought this car and it's the worst car. I should have bought another car. That regret of doing something of in the past. Well, gratitude gets you present. The precious present is what it's all about. And right now in this world and in business, there's a terrible gratitude gap. There were 200,000 employees that were interviewed, surveyed to see what were out of 23 things that were KPIs for measuring why they did what they did at work. And number one, does anybody know what number one was on the list? It was feeling appreciated. The last one on the list was money. It's not about money. I love it when people say, oh, you're just not making enough money. And 80% of the people who were interviewed said if their boss gave them more appreciation, they would work harder. Well, what's the biggest problem with corporations today? Engagement and productivity. 70% of people are not engaged, and their productivity levels are so low that they just show up for a paycheck.
And some of us employers don't like it, and we let them know.
And by showing them appreciation, right?
No.
So understand though that we're gonna work. There's a wonderful book written. It's called the Leading with Gratitude, which is where some of the statistics came from. It makes a difference. So review, become aware, follow my 3 pillars of intentional health, which is attitude, nutrition, total fitness, body, mind, spirit, and focus on habits. Remember, habits are a window into what motivates you. Be strong by making commitments and keeping them. One of the things that I'm real proud of, I created this commitment log with a client of mine, but I've had a commitment log for 30 years. We've been evolving this. A new one just came out. It's on Amazon, and it's by itself. It's a standalone, and it's a daily way of following a system that will completely transform your life. And every one of my clients gets one. So don't focus on motivation, focus on discipline, and understand that optimism is not being a Pollyanna. Being optimistic is if you're in a dark tunnel and you're in a hole and it's like you see no way out. Optimism is knowing that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. That's very different than just being in that hole alone. Optimism is a very powerful tool, and it's something that can be learned. It's a skill. Gratitude isn't just about saying, oh, I'm grateful. That's practicing a gratitude daily. That's great. But what about expressing gratitude? That's taking it to a higher level. And expressing gratitude is like telling somebody that you're grateful, or paying it forward when you're online for coffee and you're like, you know what, I'm going to pay somebody's bill without them even knowing. And then what about receiving gratitude? Gratitude actually has more power when it's received. So I love giving gratitude because I know that it's helping the other person. So you get it back tenfold. So are you ready? This is ways that you can become, be strong, be grateful. You can join my Facebook group, Optimized Health for Leaders. I have a LinkedIn newsletter called Intentional Health. Please subscribe. You can take the inner critic quiz, that QR code that's there. You can scan that, or you can go to that proattitudes.com/follow and take the inner critic quiz, or follow me on any one of these platforms that I'm on: LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, or Instagram. And there's my email. And now I want to say thank you. And are there any questions?
I'm going to shut the recording now, everyone. So 1 second.